And we're live. Okay, welcome LinkedIn family. Thanks for joining us today. This is the second episode of the show. I think I will call it DiTalks because we're doing talks with digital professionals. And the whole idea, I would like to remind that the whole idea of the show is that we want people to share the darkest secrets of their profession, to challenge some assumptions that people and the clients usually make that lead to terrible mistakes and cost them a lot of money usually. And I would like to welcome our today's guest, Mike Rispoli. Hi, thanks for joining
Hello.
us.
Thanks for
Uh,
having me, Alex.
yeah, thanks for accepting the invite. Mike is the co-founder of the Pause of a Kind agency, and what they do is mostly a lot of software development. So, Mike, would you tell us a little bit about your company, what you do, what are your clients typically, and what's your superpower?
Sure thing. Sure thing. Yeah. So Cause of a Kind, we're a digital agency and we focus mainly on web software, but also do native mobile development. And really the bulk of our kind of work is done around entrepreneurs and businesses with mission driven um, causes or mission driven kind of angles. We don't exclusively do that, but that tends to be the biggest niche for us and kind of why we got into this. Our thought is we'd like to use our abilities to solve problems using computers, using the web for strong missions, making the world a better place. And so that's really where we'd like to be. I think in terms of our superpower, or our specialties, it's really kind of the modern web. We're definitely big into UI development, particularly TypeScript and React. But also we do work in other frameworks and we do a lot of backend dev as well, but a lot of Node.js type stuff. So, GraphQL and a lot of serverless Jamstack, which is getting bigger now. So we really kind of focus on more modern stacks and workflows and trying to solve difficult business problems with technology that isn't currently served by a lot of different solutions.
Wow, that's that's an impressive long explanation. It's just like to our viewers, I would like to explain why I wanted to talk to Mike. I've been also in software development for like 5 to 10 years maybe, and I've talked to a lot of agency owners, a lot of agencies, a lot of engineers, and I think Mike is honestly one of the brightest. Uh, so I think they are capable of doing any kind of project. So any kind of challenges faced, I think Mike have solved. So that's why he's so awesome. And returning back, the idea is to challenge some main assumptions that we do have in the programming world. Some of the challenges that people are facing and might not even understand that they would be there. Some of the mistakes. Um, and the first question, and the most typical one, I think, is you to add more developers to the project to get it done faster. And as we like to say, it's, 9 women would carry a child in a month or something like that. So
Yes. I think that's from a famous book, the Mythical Man Month, kind of talks about this. But that book was written a long time ago. I want to say it came out like the 80s or something like that. And I think this holds true even today. But it's amazing how you get sucked into it. Kind of as an agency owner, a lot of times you get clients and they come to you and it's always an immediate need. You never get a client like a year before they want a project, so there's like all this planning time. It's always kind of like, hey, I need a team to build this thing for me. We need it right now, and we needed it yesterday. And you'll go and you'll quote like, hey, it's going to take 14 weeks, and then they're like, well, we have a big thing, it's got to get done in 8. And I think that even myself now, you sort of get goaded into trying to reduce the time. I recently made the mistake myself where I was like, okay, well, maybe if we add an extra person here and we put 2 people on for this little segment, so you kind of try and break the project down, because obviously 2 people can't work on the same feature. So, given a certain number of features, that's usually what's meant by the impossibility, right? That 9 women can birth a baby in 1 month. That it's a similar, the idea is generally the same with software. It's not that if there's not enough room for 9 people to work on individualized tasks, or those tasks are interdependent on one another in some way, you really aren't going to get more juice out of adding an extra person. A lot of times it's going to make the project slower. And I think that that's something to keep in mind at all times, is like every time, a project's falling behind, you have this temptation to like, all right, well, I'm going to throw another person in there. And then they have to ramp up. Then they kind of try and figure out what's going on. It takes a few days just for them to get going. And usually if you're already kind of delayed, that time that they're getting going and becoming productive in the project ends up costing more time because other developers have to help them get up to speed. And so I have found that on some level, at the start of a project, you could try and break it off into independent streams. And that's usually like the most developers I could put on this project is 4. Like, let's say there's like 4 isolated domains. If we're doing like a domain-driven design kind of thing, that's pretty much, and within those domains, there might be some features. So then you could maybe add some people there, but you sort of look at it and you say, well, the max number of people I could possibly put on this thing would be like, all right, 4, if it's 1 person per domain, or if there's some isolation in there, maybe I can get 6. But if the client pressures you for more time, they're thinking like it's like construction, you throw more people at it, like, all right, well, just, you got to build a wall. So just add 20 more people and have each of them put a brick on the wall. Software just doesn't work like that. So there's too many interdependencies, and there's too much ramp up time. It's very, as they say, it's a lot easier to write code than to read it. So when you add somebody to a project, it's hard for them to read what's been done under pressure, mind you, and figure out what's going on, and then figure out where they can put their brick in the wall. So
to not break the wall completely.
Exactly. Right. Saying, why is this here? Not understanding all the context. Especially in an agency world, it's a little different when you work at a product company. When the projects are bigger and longer, you can usually add people in, have the ramp up time. But with agency style work, the budgets are fixed, the timelines are quick. I always say that running an agency is more like running a restaurant than running a software company. It's fast. You have to have a lot of balls in the air at once. You're trying to be as efficient as possible. And so at the start of the project, my gut will usually give me as I lay out all the pieces, this is the maximum number of people. This is how long I think it should take. And I find that you really should not get pushed into doing more, because then you kind of disappoint everybody. It's definitely better to err on, and I even err on the side of, I'd rather have 2 excellent developers than 5 mediocre developers, let's say. I'd almost rather have less people on a project, because I do think that adding more ends up really costing you more in time than you would care to admit.
Yeah, we had once a project where we had to actually fire a couple of people, and the CTO made it, I think, in half the time we were expecting 2 of them to do it. So these things happen.
It's been tough. I think that, Justin and I, my business partner, when we founded this agency, I was doing a lot of the work. And so all of our times were based on how long it took me to finish things. And then when we started switching as we grew and I couldn't possibly do everything, I was still doing our timelines based on how long it would take me to do it. And that kind of created some friction there, because really it was taking people a little bit longer than, and so you have to kind of be mindful of that too, when you kind of bring, as your organization grows and you're taking on more projects that you don't have visibility into. You just got to watch out for that.
What's the solution if you want to add more developers and have it done faster? Account for transactional costs, or what?
I think a friend of mine used to have this idea of for their life, they used to say fewer better things. And so I would say fewer better developers. I think that's kind of our goal right now. I've seen a lot, and there's that whole 10x developer thing that kind of circulates around Twitter every now and then, and people kind of mock it. But I think when you have someone who is really, really good in your org, and you've and you run an organization, and we've found this ourselves, you realize how invaluable they are.
So
like
quantity doesn't wouldn't create quality in this.
No, I wish I could duplicate my best people. Honestly, that's some of that's really one of the most difficult things. Is we have a few people in our organization that we know that like we couldn't survive without, because when a project's falling behind or something like that, I can almost remove two people and put this one person in and it'll recover. That's really what ends up happening. Where if I see a project falling behind, like you said, usually now my tendency is like, I think I have too many people here. There's too many cooks in the kitchen. I need to put the master chef in and get them to recover this thing. And so like, that's why when we look at like our best people now, and when we're hiring, we think of like, is this the kind of person that like on a moment's notice could jump into a project, I could remove all distractions and they would manage to put it together.
Yeah. Well, that's a very logical point, and I've seen this mistake a lot of times, especially once again when people are hiring. I think like, okay, we can afford 10 developers, so let's put 10 developers here and expect that it would work out better. So it doesn't work this way. Okay, so let's go to the next point. Is that you have the designs, you have some mock-ups done, and how much that would cost and when it will be done. So this is kind of typical thing that clients try to start project with.
Oh yeah, this is very typical, right? They hand you a bunch of mock-ups that like maybe a student did, or maybe they had a really good friend that put in the time. You have a beautiful design and they say, okay, how much does it cost to make this thing? And my first kind of go-to there is, hey, we need to do some kind of a functional spec. We have to scope it. We need to be paid to do that. And then the response sometimes is, to the uninitiated, the response is, well, why am I going to pay you to tell me how much it's going to cost? And to me, I said, well, you only did half the job for me to tell you how much it's going to cost, right? Visually, I can tell you how, yeah, of course, visually, I can build this thing in HTML and CSS, and I know how long that would take. But the business logic that goes underneath each piece, like a login flow and check, if we're doing e-commerce, let's talk about like checkout flows, or any kind of app has some kind of a business domain logic that needs to be ironed out. And until we know all of that, we don't know what the shape of the databases are going to be, what type of database we're going to use. Can this be built in what technology, what services we can leverage to speed up different parts of it. Like, a lot of people don't realize there's a lot of off-the-shelf pieces of software that we can use, but we have to be able to identify all of those things. So for me, just looking at a design and giving a ballpark number is like a huge red flag. And it's something that happens constantly, where it's like, here's what it looks like. How much is it going to cost? And so it's only half the picture.
Yeah, but let's say I'm a client. I would like to understand like at least the range before I even, if you even convince me that we do need this discovery part where you scope the things correctly and think about the architecture and stuff. So I want to know the range. Do you think it's possible?
I think that's more of a possibility, and that's usually how I kind of combat that. I sort of I'll ask some questions off the top of my head, and from experience, we can usually give some kind of a range to sort of rule it out, right? It'll be like, hey, this is, you're looking at between $50,000 and $70,000, and if they sort of right away, if they're like, I was looking to spend $5,000, then you're like, okay, no go, but sometimes they're like, oh, okay, I was thinking maybe more like 40 something. I'd be like, well, if I get into it, I might be able to figure out how to get it done for that price. Like I can actually,
we can cut features.
Yeah. Well, sometimes it's cutting features and other times it's using a service and maybe the feature isn't exactly what you want, or maybe it costs you a little bit of money per month as opposed to home growing it at the beginning, but we find a way to get your initial costs down. So I think that more people need to be willing to do that. One of the things that happens though, is I think that clients are like reluctant to give a budget because they think if they tell you 40,000, you're going to tell them 45,000, no matter what. And like, that's just not the way we do things. As a professional, I just wouldn't do that. It's not like you walk into a car lot, say, how much is this car? And then because you said I'm looking to spend 40,000, they sell you a Corolla for 40,000, just that's not what we're looking to do. I'm looking to say, where do I have to be? Like, it helps me figure out like, Do I have to leverage services? Do I have to talk to you about monthly cost? Is it even, are we even close in any way? And so I do think it's important that clients also give that budget. Here's the design. I'm looking to be in this range. When you give me those two numbers, that allows me to maybe say, is this, are you like totally out of control here or not? And then I can give a better range, and then we can talk through it. But that discovery phase is really us talking through all of those pieces that I can do to work on the price. So even though you're spending a little bit of money up front, let's say it's, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, something like that, to figure that out, that at least gives you a good idea. And you can always walk away with that and take it to another agency as well. But it helps you clarify.
I wonder if that ever happened to you, because it didn't ever happen to me. Although I always tell the clients, like, you would have some kind of spec that you can go with to another agency potentially. So did it ever happen to you?
No, it doesn't. I've definitely heard of people like shopping the idea around to make sure that like, or asking a friend who is like into computers or went to school for computer engineering or something to make sure that it made sense. But I've never had someone really shop it around. In general, what we do is we'll deduct the cost of the scoping if you go with us from your final project. So that's sort of what we'll do. We'll set, because realistically, if you had hired us from the start, we would have done this anyway. We would have had meetings with you. So we'll just deduct that from the cost, because we know if you're in the right budget and you've proven that you can do the work, people tend to not shop it around to other places like that.
Yeah. It's hard to find someone else once they found you already.
Right. Exactly.
Okay. So make sure to have a discovery phase and before any kind of project, because and you can know the client better and his needs better, and so you can fit the project into what it should be.
Right.
So that you can build it really.
I can actually get you a better price if I know all the details. It doesn't always mean that the price goes up because it could mean that we figured out something simpler than it looks too. So that's an important aspect to think about.
Exactly. Okay, so, and the next question, I think it is very, very debatable in the modern world where everywhere is globalized and people are looking to outsource, and have been working with outsourcing for companies in Eastern Europe, and we still outsource. We have some contractors from Eastern Europe right now. So and the prices, like hourly prices, they vary extremely, 10 times probably, from the lowest to the highest point for the same kind of, I don't know, middle type of developer. So what do you think about that? Why is this question here in the first place? Because I think you're the only person who tackles this question in such a direct and indirect way, in a strong way.
Yeah. We have we've drawn a very hard line in the sand at Cause of a Kind that we do not pay any human based on where they live. This is just not something we do. We don't believe in it. In a world that's flat, we kind of believe in a globalized world and
flat worlders. Okay.
Flat. Yeah. We're flat earthers in that. Yeah. In that regard. We have found, we don't think that your location should matter. A lot of people say, well, they live in a cheaper place, they should be paid less. And I'm like, well, you live in a more expensive place, why don't you move? It can go both ways. Like the same logic can apply in the other direction, where it's like, well, a person who lives in New York could, if they work for us, we don't care if you work remote. You could move to Bali and live there for the same rate. For us, we're trying to deliver work of a certain quality, and we're demanding a certain level of excellence. And I have found that people who are exceptional and deliver work at that quality, no matter where they live, know their worth. And in this economy, the best developers, whether they're in Eastern Europe or in India or in the United States or South America, are starting to command similar rates. There's some people locational advantage. Yeah, there's people in San Francisco and New York, and there are companies out there that say we pay in the 90th percentile of like San Francisco rates. And truthfully, we're not quite there yet. That's hard to compete with as an agency, I think. But we pay very well, and we pay everybody based on their skill. We do not care where you live. We have developers all over the world, and I think when you have a workforce like that too, you're going to find that, like, if you have a developer in South America and a developer in New York, and they're working together, and they ask each other how much they're getting paid, and the developer in South America is better, and they find out they're making less, it still hurts. Like, it doesn't. I don't know. I've been in that situation, and where, like, you find out someone's getting paid more than you, and you're doing more work, or you're even better than they are, and I just never want my employees to feel like that, no matter where they are in the world. I was like, it's just any way you cut it, it doesn't feel good. And it sort of goes back to this idea of, like, treating your employees like resources, or calling them resources or something.
Yeah.
Like, I've heard that a lot. Like, oh yeah, you need resources. It's like, it's not resources. This is a creative economy. This is human. This is not human capital. You want people to have the space and the comfort to, like, just be exercising their minds, and putting out the best work of their lives. So I do not want your pay to be influencing that, or your feeling of how you're being paid against somebody else. That's not the case. We're not. And the other thing is, we're not trying. A lot of people try and increase their margins by reducing their labor costs. We're really not into that on our side of things. And again, I don't think this works. And, I think this worked for shoe companies, right? But like, I think a lot of development houses, you start to run into this, where you're almost running like a postmodern sweatshop or something like that. It's just like, I was like, we're not looking. Yeah, we're just not. We're not into that. We're not trying to move to another country to get our labor costs down. We want to deliver the best work. We know that there are people paying this much money for this kind of work, and we can afford to pay our developers well, and they can live wherever they want. And we want them to be doing the best work of their lives, and to feel creative and empowered. And I just don't think you do that when you're just trying to cut costs all over the place, and you're paying people different wages. You have to pay based on skill. It's just a really, we've taken a very strong line on that. And, it's been a hard standard to keep, because a lot of development shops don't care about that.
Yeah, that's true. So people don't really know how many agents are between their project and the end developer. And sometimes it could be 3, 4, 5 agents, which would cut the prices sometimes 10 times, sometimes 5 times. And that has been one prime example has been the Boeing problem, when a couple planes crashed because the original software was not blaming the developers. The original software was developed not at US rates, but at rates like $10 an hour, when the original company could have been paying hundreds of dollars per hour, and they were doing their best job. But so that's very true.
That's right. And like I said, I find that the best developers, even in places like Asia, are commanding high rates, and that's the thing, right? You have a lot of that, where, like, a company is charging $200 an hour, and they're paying only 8, or by the time they gets to the developer, it's only 8. You're really not getting what you paid for there. That's that's not correct.
Yeah, that's very true. But and the second thing I can say, like, a lot of companies are asking, like, are your developers in-house? Because they expect that if they're in-house, it means that you are not cutting the costs this much. Whereas you present a different approach to things, that they don't have to be in-house, but you would still maintain the same level of quality, determination, and everything else. So
Yeah. I believe they have to be kind of direct employees. Like, I think that's pretty important as an agency, like to build the culture. Like, we're trying to build a remote culture and make sure people are learning from one another, because you do have to hire junior people and make sure that they're nurtured, and doing well. We definitely hire people, at the junior level, because I also think that's just an important thing to do in general, as a way to give back to the community, but also to giving people a chance. A lot of times you get some developers in, and they do a really good job, and they have a lot of potential. And that's actually very exciting for me personally, because I'm self-taught. So I kind of have that soft spot for people who come in and are super determined. And I'm kind of like, I think I can give them a shot, and I was like, I think I can help them get to where they want to be in life. And we think about that all the time at Cause of a Kind, just like, we try and ask people not just what they want for salary, but, like, what they want out of their lives. And you'd be surprised. Like, some people live out of the country and they're like, I want to move to the United States and I want to found my own business. Well, that person will never do that on $8 an hour. So like, it's really not fair. You're really squashing their dreams too if you do that. Like if somebody's looking to do something like that, and some people are just looking to do totally other things. But we always try and say, like, can we live up to this person's wildest expectations? That's like one of our kind of inner values that we try and think of, and that it's like a lofty goal, but it makes sure that we're always thinking of the human and not the resource. Like, we're just like not thinking of resources. We try and fight that way of thinking all the time.
If I was an engineer, I would be sending you money right now. It's just a really bad thing, because I've been, once again, I've been talking to a lot of agency owners, and they think a lot about margins and less about people. So kudos. Anyway, so let's switch to the next question. It's about coding standards, because the deadlines matter, the monetization matter, but the coding standards don't matter, because clients actually feel that you can go too deep into optimizing the code and spend a lot of time inefficiently. And I can understand them, but you as a developer, you want the code to be clear as a day. So why is that?
Yeah. I mean, this goes back to like the idea that when you don't keep the code standards, when you just look at the deadline, you're really being short-sighted, especially as an agency owner, right? Like, one of the lifebloods of your agency is going to be monthly recurring revenue and long-term maintenance contracts. And you're really just shooting yourself in the foot by shipping bad code like that. Because if you're hopefully, for us, we have a very high retention rate. If you have a high retention rate, this is going to matter to you, because every single thing, it doesn't look good after the project launches when someone goes, oh, I just want to change this one thing. And you're like, great, it took me 3 weeks to do it because the code was a mess and we had to refactor a bunch of it. And they're like, but you're the one who made the code. I was like, yeah, but we were trying to meet the deadline and we just didn't care. So like, that's where that comes from. That's even like, in the agency world, like skipping out on tests and things like that, not doing test-driven development. And listen, we've been in those situations, especially for like very like front-end heavy website projects. You definitely, on some levels, skipping on the testing sometimes can be the way you get those over the line. I know a lot of agencies that don't write any tests. So, that's just like it's hard, because as an agency, you're expected to deliver. The focus is always on time and delivery. And it's really hard to kind of say that this quality does matter. But when you think about it in terms of your retention rates and how you're going to look long-term to the client, you really want to make sure this is buttoned up, because you want to be able to say, when a client's like, hey, I need to do this one thing, you're like, great, it was done an hour ago. Like, boom, we got it done really quick. And that's because the code is very clean.
Yeah, and once again, as you mentioned, it's much harder to read code than to write it, and that's also one of the things that is it's scalable, and it keeps the client safe from worries that someone else wouldn't be able to work with the code as well.
That's right. You lose developers and you got to bring someone up to speed on it. And, the client doesn't want to hear, oh, my month of October is kind of dead because you had to get a new developer. Like, to them, they don't care. They're like, okay, well, that sounds like a you problem, not a me problem. So they expect to keep that same level of efficiency. So if you care about your recurring revenue, you should care about code standards.
And I also like technical debt is almost inevitable, but when you get to, like now we want a whole sprint of reducing technical debt, and the client goes, whoa, like, oh no, let's do something, like we need something in a month, let's focus on this instead, but when you maintain it along with the development, I think it doesn't hurt the client relations as well as much.
No. And I think people are coming around to that too. If you work kind of on the more B2B side instead of like more like that B2C side, they sort of understand that software is evolving. It's not like building a house. Like, a lot of people compare software to building a house, but it's different, because you build the house, it sort of stays that way forever. Software does evolve. It does kind of, in some sense, it does go stale. Like, I know that's a kind of controversial opinion, but like, if code doesn't get touched for a long time or upgraded for a long time, it can be hell to upgrade it like multiple versions, and then go back and try and figure out what was done. Even if you were the person that wrote the code, like I could go back to code I wrote 2 years ago, and sometimes I'm like, wait, I did that? Like, who's the jerk that wrote this? Yeah, oh, that was me. Like, so you got to humble yourself to that too. Once you've been in that situation, you're like, oh yeah, I was not kind to my future self either.
True. Okay, next question. Or rather comment that developers don't have to talk, or don't need to talk. So what do you think about that?
Yeah. So this is another pretty big one on my radar, is like developers that can talk to clients. For us, that's like the golden situation. More important than the 10x developer is like almost like, I think in some agencies they're almost like a creative technologist, I think is what we call them, but like the kind of a developer that can like really get into a problem on a human level with a client and speak about the technology and translate the solutions back to them in an effective manner is so important. A lot of agencies run on this idea of like a product or a project manager doing this as like the go-between the developers, and they sort of insulate the developers from the client entirely. Everybody's goal is to like insulate them, but then you're relying on this translation layer. And an old CEO kind of told me an analogy that, we were having problems between two teams, and the tendency to put a middle, like you got to resist the urge to put a middle manager between two teams that aren't getting along, because what ends up happening is the two teams just both hate the middle manager, and they'll build a camaraderie around hating the middle manager that's supposed to be the telephone tag between them. And so I kind of think of this almost the same style, where it's like, well, we want to reduce the telephone effect. We want to reduce these messengers, so I want to have that free flow of information between the client and the developer. So for me, when I know a developer can communicate, not only do I know they can communicate to clients, but I know they're going to be able to teach junior developers, which is super important as well, and is a part of kind of the lead interview process. For us is, a lot of people do their coding challenge where the developer codes with me watching. For me, when I switch it for when you're interviewing at the lead level, you tell me how to code. So I'll code, and that's how we pair program, because I want to understand your technical communication, and I kind of play the junior developer in a sense. And that sometimes it reduces people's stress to have it that way. But the real reason is I'm trying to see how well you communicate, and can you be in front of a client and communicate well? Because I think that's kind of the thing that really separates those people that become super invaluable to our organization.
Well, to me, it sounds like it's almost impossible to find developers who can both code at the level you describe and communicate at the level you describe without, like, okay, because I've been that middle manager who everyone hates. Most of the time, I think I'm good. And yeah, and I am right now, because not all of my developers communicate, because like I kind of guard them from having to, to explain some things, because I'm sure that I will make a very good job explaining both to clients and to developers the needs of the project, etc., etc. So I'm coming from a different camp, but and partially this is because like if you want to find a developer like you described, it's really hard, and to believe in people that they will be good enough. So how to do
Yeah.
that?
Usually what I start to do it, because, again, we're still small. I still play that role a lot, that middle person. I'll start bringing developers into those calls, because I think it's important that they start to learn and see how I would do it. Because what happens is I'll have a meeting with the client, and all that does is create double the amount of meetings on the other side, because now I have to have another meeting to explain all the things, and I have to hope that I took good notes. And I'm a developer by trade. I'm not good at the notes part, like I know, like I'll keep it all in my head. And so for me, I'm like, I want to fight the meetings. I want to fight process. It's not that I don't want to have any process, but I want to really keep people very autonomous and keep that flat management structure. So I don't like to have like a lot of layers of middle management and communication layers, between the developers. And so if I can get one lead that can do this and communicate effectively to the team, but you are right, the finding of those individuals is very, very difficult, because a lot of times we find very good communicators that aren't really great developers, or we find really great developers that aren't really great communicators. Getting both at the same time is very tricky.
Yeah, that's true. And I just know a lot of developers, they hate this. As I say, they hate meetings in general. And they don't want to spend hours of time on the phone. And sometimes clients do need, actually, sometimes they do need this. They need to speak their mind to discuss some issues. Okay, so you can focus some of the things, and have a lot of developers, they go, okay, I don't want any meetings. I just want the task list to make sure I understand priorities. So just write it all
Yeah.
out.
These are not the kind of this is not the kind of developers we're looking for, in general, especially at the agency level, because to me, you should be excited to solve the problem, right? Like who wants to just punch a task list? That's like a factory, I'm thinking
Okay. Yeah, I
I'm
see
thinking
what you mean.
I'm giving you the freedom to get on the phone with this client and try to save them time, save them money, change their lives, really. Like a lot of people are running their own businesses, they're working with all these inefficiencies, and you're able to come in and kind of be their hero in a way. So I think that, it's true, there's sort of this idea, developers don't want to talk to people, but I'm like, but you'd rather just work a task list and then have to ask questions every 2 minutes about oh, well, why are we doing it this way? Couldn't we do it? You can work with the client to come up with something cool. I just feel like that collaboration is a part of the fun of solving problems. So at the end of the day, when I think of developers, I'm we're solving problems. And so that should be the thing that you thrive on, or that we're looking for people to thrive on that. The one thing I guess I do try to say that developers should be insulated from is budgets. I don't
Why?
believe. Yeah, we can go into that too. I don't want developers stressing over budgets. I've worked at agencies before where, as a developer, you get too close to knowing if they're upside down, how much the client spent. It starts to stress everything out. How quickly do I have to get this done? This client isn't even paying for this. I don't want no, your job is not to worry about what the client's paying for. Now. That's my job. Let me figure that out. I've got that under control. I want you to do the best work of your life. The money, just forget that. If it's going overboard, I'll let you know. That's for me to have that tough conversation with the client. But I don't believe that developers should be having that kind. I don't want a developer getting on a call with a client and saying, "Yeah, but you're running out of budget." Like that, I do think. And if you ever go into an ad agency that does TV commercials with copywriters, those guys are just totally isolated in another area, working the creative genius, no knowledge of the budget, no knowledge, it's just listen, you need to do the best work. And so that's my thought is solve the problem, do your best work. Tell me how long you think it's going to take. I'll work with, I'll figure out how to deal with that. But I definitely like to insulate the developer from all that, unless they are trying to learn that side of the business. By all means, I'd love, I have no problem there. I just don't want that to ever become a stressor on a call with the developer and a client. I don't want them to ever be thinking about that while they're working on a client's project, because ultimately doing the absolute best work will always win out long term for us. I do not really make money on clients from one-off projects. I don't think most businesses do. I worked for Enterprise Rent-A-Car right out of college, and the thing they taught us is we don't make money on one car rental. We make money when that customer never rents anywhere else for the rest of their life. I don't make money on a website. I make money when that customer comes back to me forever, when that person leaves that job and brings another, and goes to another job and brings that project to me. So my goal is for everybody to have the best possible experience with Cause of a Kind and do whatever it takes. Obviously, there's always some, we can't just give away everything. We do still have to keep the lights on, but let me worry about keeping the lights on. You just worry about doing the best work of your life.
Wonderful. Yeah, that's a wonderful approach, and that's just how we work as well. I mean, my art director, who's been in business for 20 years, he never asks for money. He prohibits me to talk about money. Like the only thing I talk to him is like sometimes deadlines, but mostly like, and if we take a smallish type of project, he doesn't know about it. So he's 100% into anything that we're doing. So, and whereas it's a huge brand or a smallish startup, it's the same level of top quality all the time. And okay, so let's try to wrap up with the final question. And the final question is the main insight of 2021 in the area of development. So, what would you like to share?
Yeah. So I think that, the main insight of 2021, I want to say 2020 into 2021 in general, was that businesses were not investing enough money in software. I know it sounds crazy because everyone's like, software is eating the world. But then the pandemic hit and people's behavior is not going back to the way it was. People are getting more things delivered. People are suddenly using Apple Pay, right? Like people probably never used it before. People's expectations for how seamless technology is going to fit into their lives has now forever been raised. The bar is up now. And a lot of businesses, I think, learn too, like if you were now dependent on Seamless to do all your food delivery, and now you realize how much money you're losing to Seamless, and you're like, oh man, like I think somebody came to me and said they'd build me a delivery system, 3 years ago. And I said, nah, I don't need that. No, I'm just going to do the telephone thing. But now everyone loves the Domino's app. It's so easy. And now I can't get anybody to come to my pizza shop, although here in New York, that's probably never the case, but we have good pizza here. But my point being is that I think that the amount of money that small to medium-sized businesses need to invest in software is going to go up. I think they now see the value in it. I think that there was always an age-old moniker that it was always cheaper to buy off-the-shelf software than to build it yourself. And I think with the rise of SaaS, we might start seeing that change a little bit. I think that SaaS is starting to eat itself with the per user costs. And, we've seen this, right? You use a project management tool where you pay per seat and you're like, well, I have 10 people who are on and off the project. They're not all full-time employees. And I want to add the client. Now I got 20 people. I'm paying $100 a head. It almost becomes cheaper. It's like, well, I could just build the thing myself and I can have it forever. And so I think that that's starting to shift a little bit where I think that the SaaS model we're starting to see people invest more in homegrown software in stuff that they want to maintain themselves. And I think that's really where we're starting to excel as an agency.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that thought. I also see a lot of changes in 2021. There's a lot of competition in software development. Like you have to be really good to stand out, and the pricing. The world flattens in terms of development as well, so that the price rise in it's very significant. So hiring from any place in the world, you have to pay almost the same amount of money as well. And yeah, but I would also mention no code tools. Some of the no code tools that allow for a quicker kind of MVP thing, but that's a little bit another topic. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. We could talk about, I think that area, I think that all the tools right now, they're not there yet. Like I've used a few of them. I'm not, but I see it though. Like every time we build a project, I can see all these pieces where I'm like, we can make a tool out of this. That is kind of our big insight going into 2022 is our agency does want to build a product, and it will probably be some kind of a low code product because we have a lot of ideas around that, and agencies are very poised for this because we do a lot of repeatable work. We copy paste a lot of code, like we definitely do a lot of things over and over again. So we see these needs coming up. And so I agree. Low code I think that's an untapped, it's just barely getting there right now where you still have to be too technical to use it, I think.
Okay. Good developers will still be there for us.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Mike. It's been a pleasure talking to you. And,
likewise.
see you next time.
Thanks, Alex. Have a great one.
Bye.